Good morning, everyone. I am Pastor Rob Lloyd, and this is the South Edmiston Community Church. I just want to welcome you this morning. We're going to be in week number 3 right now of the fruits of the Spirit as found in Galatians. Today we're going to be talking about faithfulness and goodness, and we're going to be looking at the story of the book of Ruth. We're going to be actually going through the entire book of Ruth to tell the story of Ruth, Boaz, and Naomi, in the faithfulness and goodness that they showed through their experience. So I hope you enjoy. Stick around. So we're going to do a whole lot of reading. We're going to be starting off in Ruth chapter 2. We're going to turn to Ruth chapter 2. The last couple of weeks we've been talking about the fruit of the Spirit. We covered self-control on the first week, and then last week we talked about love, gentleness, and kindness. And this week we're going to be talking about faithfulness and goodness. And in talking about faithfulness and goodness, I wanted to use an actual story in the Bible to portray a way that a few people actually showed those two fruits, the faithfulness and the goodness. We're going to look at 3 different people. We're going to be looking at Naomi, we're going to be looking at Ruth, and we're going to be looking at Boaz. 3 different people, but primarily Ruth and Boaz as we go forward into the book of Ruth. So one thing we kind of skipped over a little bit in the last couple of weeks is what is a fruit of the Spirit? What's the point of using that word, fruit of the Spirit? Well, all through mainly the New Testament, it talks about us. If we're doing the works for the Lord, we're bearing fruit. If we are a good branch connected to the vine, being God Himself, we are bearing fruit. Scripture also tells us that if we are not bearing fruit, just like a shrub or a tree or a vine, we will be cut off and thrown in the fiery furnace. Kind of a scary thought if we're not bearing fruit. So as we look at these different fruits, we got to look at ourselves and say, am I producing any of these fruits in my life? If not, then why not? Why am I not producing these fruits? Why am I not growing and showing these fruits in my life? So again, today we're going to be looking at faithfulness and goodness. And then next week, we're going to be wrapping up the final 2. So we're going to be doing a lot of reading here in Ruth to go into how the story relates. And we're skipping chapter 1 because it gives a little bit more of a history lesson that we can go over quicker than I can read through it. And Naomi and her husband, they had 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. These 2 sons were married. A famine came into the land, and they left their land in search of greener pastures, basically, somewhere that they could actually eat and survive. So through this all, we learned in chapter 1 that all 3 men passed away. So it leaves Naomi as the mother-in-law, and then 2 daughter-in-laws left to fend for themselves. So Naomi says, in essence, girls, I know you want to stick together with me, but if I was to have a husband tonight and have sons, are you going to wait for those sons to grow up to marry them? No, you're not going to wait for that. You go home to your families, to your people. Leave me alone. I will go back to my people you go back to your people. And the one daughter-in-law, Orpah, she did. She returned to her people. But Ruth stuck around. Ruth says, no, I'm going to stay here with you. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Everything that you are about is what I am about now, because I am here for you. I am not going to leave you. Stop asking. So that leaves us where we are right now, going into chapter 2. And this is Ruth and Naomi heading back to Naomi's people. So start off in chapter 2, verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him, in whose sight I shall find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men to not touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. And at mealtime Boaz said to her, come here and eat some bread, and dip your morsel in the wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain, and she ate until she was satisfied. And she had some left over. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. And her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, the man's name with whom I work today is Boaz. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness is not forsaken the living or the dead. Naomi also said to her, the man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers. We're going to stop right there just for a second. What is a redeemer? Back in Old Testament times, if there was a man who passed away who was married, someone had to take care of his widow. It would be the next youngest brother going down through. So any of you guys that have a brother and you're married, you pass away, your younger brother would marry your wife. And If there was no other brothers, how about a cousin? If there's no cousins, how about a second cousin? And it would go out till the nearest, most related person to the husband basically would have to marry her. There was ways out of it, we'll see that later on here, but it was your duty as a man, if you were the closest related to the man that died, to marry her and to carry on his family by having children with his wife. And that's where the Redeemer part comes in. To redeem that woman so that she didn't, number one, starve to death, and so you could carry on the name of her husband. So this Boaz was considered a close relative and a possible redeemer to Ruth at this point. So we'll go on verse 21. And Ruth the Moabite said, besides, he said to me, you shall keep close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted. So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet, and lie down. He will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say, I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, his heart was merry. And when he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. And he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but rose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city, and when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest today, but will settle the matter today. Well, let's think about this. She has been totally faithful to her mother-in-law, doing everything that she has been told to do. Now think of the fact that she is told out to sneak into where he's at, and this is a very public area. They didn't have the toys that a lot of the farmers have today. To thresh out all this barley, it was put over these rudimentary kind of grates in a public area, and cattle, sheep, oxen, whatever, were put in there to walk around. And their feet would knock it loose, and it would fall down through. The little stuff would go in, and the big stuff would stay up, and theoretically you got all of your grain that you were supposed to get. Kind of a crude way to do it, but if this is all your barley, and it's worth a lot of money, and it's in a public area, you're going to lay down with your barley. Nobody's coming in and stealing your stuff. So that's why he was staying there, and she had to make sure that she knew where he laid down, is because he was going to be there to guard his barley. So she goes, and it's a kind of a customary submission thing that she would lay at his feet. And it was a sign of acceptance that he would cover her with the blanket that he had. A sign that, yes, you are worthy, you are acceptable, that type of a thing. But the next step into this is kind of unique too. Knowing that he's a redeemer and knowing how society worked back then, she proposed marriage to him. Think about that. Even in this society where everything is all screwy today, you still don't see very many women proposing marriage to a man. What guts Ruth must have had to propose marriage to Boaz. To say, you are a redeemer, redeem me. How difficult was this for her to do? How difficult, this man you barely know, but you've known him for a month or two, because it's going to take a while to bring in everything out of the fields. He's shown kindness, but to propose marriage that quick, very strong sign of faith there by Ruth. So we'll go into the story a little bit farther, and then we'll kind of go into the faithfulness and goodness that the people had. So chapter 4, now Boaz had gone up into the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer, of whom Boaz had spoken, came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. So this kind of puts a twist in the plot. Because Boaz wants Ruth, Ruth wants Boaz, Boaz goes to the closest redeemer. Sure, I'll redeem it. Literally, got a flaw and slaw here. This isn't going to work. But Boaz is a smart man, as we read a little farther. He knows how to negotiate a little bit. Then Boaz says, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead and his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. This was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and to the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead and his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give to you by this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to her, Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age for your daughter-in-law who loves you, which is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So there, we got done reading. We made it through that part. So what do we learn from this story about faithfulness and about goodness? We think of, we'll start with Naomi. She was faithful to God in the fact that after her husband and sons passed away, she went back to Bethlehem, back to her people. She was faithful to God. She didn't become like the Moabites. She didn't stay there and worship Baal or any of their gods. She knew that she needed to be faithful and go back to Israel, to actually Judah in this case, to be part of her people, to worship God. She was faithful and she was good to Ruth because of her understanding and because of her intelligence. Each step of the way, she guided Ruth, told her, this is what you should do. This is what. Right along the way, go do this. Go do this. Each step of the way. I need you to do this because this is what's best for you. It never says in here that Naomi did anything for herself. It was all, Ruth, go do this to make it better for you. To do this for you. Very good and very faithful to Ruth every step of the way. And then we step into Ruth. Look at the way she did absolutely everything she was asked to do. She didn't question it. She knew Naomi was right. Every step of the way did what she was told to do. Imagine how difficult that must have been. Well, we said a few minutes ago, how difficult must it have been for her, a foreigner in the land, to come up to Boaz and propose marriage to him. How difficult was that? Her entire life had been difficulty. She had lost her husband, lost everything she had, and now she's in a totally new country, doesn't know anybody, totally on her own. All she has is her mother-in-law and her guidance. She showed extreme faithfulness to her mother-in-law every step of the way by doing what she was told to do, by doing what she understood that the God of Israel wanted her to do. And then there's Boaz. Boaz was a man of God. We know that when he comes back to his farm and what he says. Hey, God be with you. God be with you as well. Not the exact words, but that's how he greeted his people. He greeted them with a blessing from God. May God be with you. May God bless you, my workers. How many workers in here have heard that from their boss? He's a boss. Hey, say that to your workers, Travis. See how that works. Expect that tomorrow, man. Well, God bless you this morning. But let's think about that. I mean, how often? It's not something you would normally do. It's not part of the workplace. It's not part of our society. But he did this. He definitely loved God and followed God. His faithfulness to God was huge. He remained faithful. The definition of faithful, enduring loyalty and trustworthiness. Look at how all three of them, they had an enduring loyalty to each other, a trustworthiness to each other, and then the goodness, the moral excellence. Think about that, the goodness, moral excellence. How did Boaz treat everyone in his fields? He treated them all very honorably. Knowing Ruth wasn't one that was used to gleaning in the field, tells his men, you know, if you'll pull a little bit out, just going to throw it on the ground for her, help her out a little bit. Come eat with us, Ruth. Come be part of this. His hospitality toward Ruth was amazing. You could tell right from the start, there was some sort of an attraction there. Otherwise, all the women that are usually there doesn't really have any connection there. But Ruth, there is. There's a connection there. That connection was a divine intervention. God made it happen because he had a bigger plan in this than any of the other three people had. God had a huge plan in this. Knowing the faithfulness, knowing the goodness. And Boaz, first thing he does the next day, he goes out to the coffee shop, which is the city gate. It's where everybody hangs out. They didn't have a Stewart's back then, so they all hung out by the city gates. So they're hanging out, and hey, you're the Redeemer. Come on over here, I gotta talk to you. And you 10 guys, I trust you all, you're all elders of the city. Come on over here, I gotta talk to you too. And I like the cool part in there, hey, you're a closer Redeemer. If you want to buy that field from her, go ahead and buy it, just let me know. Well, yeah, I'll redeem that, that's great, I'll buy that field. Cool, I like that field. Yeah, but she comes with it. And if she comes with it, mother-in-law comes with it, and drama comes with it, because you're probably married, and now you got an extra wife, an extra her mother-in-law, you just brought baggage on yourself. And that guy's like, nah, sorry, I don't want that field anymore because I don't want the baggage. Because the baggage to this, if he spends his hard-earned money to buy that field, remember, this is still not his wife. It is Mahlon's wife. Anything he does with her, any children they have together are attributed to Mahlon. When he dies, his children with wife number one, no inheritance in that field or anything that comes from it. Mahlon's children have that inheritance. And that's why he said he doesn't want to mess up his inheritance. Because he's got something good here. Now we're going to add more kids into the mix, and another group of family into the mix, and they're going to take away from what my original kids had. This is going to be a mess. Sorry, you take it. I don't want it. I don't want the field because I don't want Ruth, and I don't want Naomi because I don't want to mess up with all this drama that we're now adding to my life. Boaz, on the other hand, he was a good man. He was a faithful man. He said, I will redeem it. I will buy the field. I will take her on as her redeemer. I will take care of her mother-in-law. I will take care of all this because in his heart, Boaz was a good man. Boaz knew the position and the predicament they were in, and he was willing to be the knight in shining armor, for better words, to that family. He wanted to do for her. Then we come to the statement that I made that God had a bigger plan in mind. The last verse that I skipped over really quick, if we don't look into that one, we lose the entire story. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. This baby was the grandfather to King David, a man after God's own heart, the most fierce warrior ever in battle for the nation Judah and the nation Israel. One of only 3 kings that ruled those 2 nations together as one. David did some amazing, amazing things. And then even the bigger picture, 28 generations later, was Jesus. Because of what they did. Because of their goodness, their faithfulness, came King David, another 28 generations later. This was the lineage Jesus came from. So if we overlook that one little verse, we overlook the whole story. Everything that came together. God gave Ruth that strength for one reason, for his son to be born here on earth to save us from our sins. That's why God gave Ruth the strength. That's why he gave Naomi the strength, and then ultimately the family that came from him. Again, the lineage that brought us Jesus. And if we think some of the things that we overlook, it really may not make that big a difference. Do you know what your grandkids are going to do, or your great-grandkids? In this case, 30 generations later? We have no idea, 30 generations, what one little act of faithfulness is going to do in that family that far down the road. We have no idea the mistakes that we make or the good things that we do, what that is going to be in our lineage. So I want to impress on all of you today, don't overlook the little things. If you have the opportunity to be faithful, if you have the opportunity to be good, you may not see what that ends up being. But we could see down the road, in this case, just exactly because of Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz, what came on our salvation. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for what you put in some of these books of the Bible, the little things that we can so easily overlook that means so much. The fact that their goodness, the fact that their faithfulness to each other and to you is what you used to bring your son Jesus into this world, to give us our salvation, to be our everything. We just thank you so much for that. We thank you for the fact that it's in here, that we can learn from it. And through what they did, we can model that in our lives. When someone's a little down and out, maybe we can be a little more faithful to them, show them more goodness, instead of overlooking them as beneath us, that we would just show them your love, and they could see your love through our actions. See that we're a believer through our actions, and ultimately come to you and be saved themselves, Lord. Again, we just thank you for everything you do in this church, because you do so much for us. And we thank you in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. So the fruits of the Spirit are something that a lot of people know quite well. The story of Ruth is also something that people know quite well. Is there something that kind of stuck out to you that maybe you didn't know? Maybe you learned today in the message? If so, leave a comment down below. Or if you, something you strongly believe in, whatever, that maybe disagree with me on or whatever, I'll leave that comment down below as well. We'd like to have some feedback from anyone that watches our videos. And we would also like to ask you to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you'll know when we upload these videos and you can be part of it. And if you live here locally, we'd like to also invite you out to be part of the church service, not just on the video, but to be here in person. And as always, may God bless each and every one of you today.